topic this week, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, does deal with the passing of Jamin Pugh, otherwise known as Jay Briscoe, one half of the iconic tag team, the Briscoe brothers, tragically passing away in an automobile accident. He was only, looking at the numbers here, he was only 39, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was I think I could be wrong here.
38. 38. He was,
yep.
Yeah, he was born the same year as I was, 84.
Yeah, he would have been 39 next week. And unfortunately, Jamin Pugh, otherwise known as Jay Briscoe, was involved in a tragic automobile accident this week. Details are still sketchy. Maybe coming back from taking one of his daughters to a competition, whether that was cheerleading, track and field, I don't know. But just a guy with a long lineage of a career in pro wrestling, starting off obviously with Combat Zone Wrestling in the early 2000s, obviously working his way to Ring of Honor, where he and his brother essentially for over 20 years were the dominant tag team in that company. Some stops along the way, obviously last year in Impact wrestling at the first ever multiverse of matches where they battled the Good Brothers, Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson. Obviously some years in New Japan Pro Wrestling, a plethora of titles that he and his brother won over the years, certainly from New Japan to Ring of Honor to Real Championship Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Unplugged, the Premier Wrestling Federation, NWA Wildside, the National Wrestling Alliance, winning the Crockett Cup with his brother Mark in 2022, House of Glory, amazing worker, an amazing talker, clearly a family man, a long list of accolades. To see this man now passing in the prime of his career, as a fan who's had an enormous amount of respect for what the Briscoes mean to this business, it was tragic news to see this. My heart goes out to his family. My thoughts are with his wife and kids and his family and his brother, certainly, and his immediate family. A tragic loss for the pro wrestling community. Again, as a fan, Pat, I know you as a worker can certainly give this a lot more justice than I could, again, just as a fan alone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. So when I saw the news of this, I was really sad, just as everybody else was from the wrestling business. But in my time in the independents, I had the opportunity and the privilege to know Mark and Jay and to work on shows with them for JCW. We also forgot to mention Jersey All Pro Wrestling, which was another promotion where they also made their name at, along with, the aforementioned Ring of Honor and Combat Zone Wrestling. But, both of those guys were very, very, very good athletes. They understood the business quickly. They were ambitious, and they were a family, The Pugh family, they were always there. And this is when I remember just it being, Jay's dad really that was there with them, or Jay's mom and dad. But, they would drive from Delaware up to Jersey to work these shows, to work these indie shows, so that the boys could, get their experience, get their reps in. They went to ECWA, the East Coast Wrestling Association, which at that time in the early 2000s was, pretty much a gateway to WWE, or at least enhancement work, getting looked at, getting invited for tryouts and stuff like that. So, at that time it was run by Jim Kettner. And Jim Kettner was the guy who held the prestigious Super 8 tournament. That was a tournament that made a lot of people. I mean, Bryan Danielson was in it, Loki was in it, Christopher Daniels, Devin Storm, the Inferno Kid, Reckless Youth, Trent Acid, Shark Boy. I mean, the names go on and on and on and on. But the Briscoes were just dudes that just got it. They weren't just young, talented guys, athletic guys that were just big marks that could just, that wanted to hit their shit or, do whatever. Like, they understood the art of wrestling. They understood what it was like, but they knew how to pop a crowd too, and they knew how to do some really exciting stuff. And they developed as wrestlers. They developed as performers. Back then, they weren't really talkers. They were kind of shy, Mark especially. But those boys could go. And it was just so fun seeing all their matches and all this stuff and talking to them, you know? And one thing that I can say that I'm sure anybody who's ever met Jay and Mark Briscoe or been around them for, you know, some time can tell you is that they were really good guys. They were really just down to earth people. You know, one of my friends in the business, who was a booker for Jersey All Pro Angel Sarita, had nothing but great things to say about him, you know. This is the kind of guy that, you know, wasn't a mark for himself, wasn't just trying to get his shit in, you know, wasn't trying to do anything like that. Wasn't trying to get his stuff in, wasn't trying to do anything like that. And can you please hold? Sorry about that. So as I was saying, these are, you know, this is a guy, or these are guys that, you know, just understood what the business was about and wanted to be in the business, wanted to grow in the business, and knew that they were a part of an ensemble cast, you know, every time they stepped into that ring, you know, and when it was their time to shine, it was their time to shine. But they knew what the business was about, and they were humble, and, you know, they were guys that you could really, really see going a long way. I mean, you know, I remember seeing them and them reminding me instantly of the Haas brothers, you know, or the Steiners or the Bulldogs. You know, they had this intangible. They had this it factor. And I think personally, them as performers, you know, and as people, I don't think they ever got too full of their own shit, no matter how much they succeeded, because they succeeded a lot. And in the 20 years that they were a team, you know, Jay and Mark wrestled all over the world, you know, did tours in Japan when they were teenagers, you know, just went everywhere and gained so much experience and so much knowledge, but they stayed humble. They stayed grounded. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that, you know, they were a family, and you know, the way their father raised them, I think he didn't really let that happen. So, you know, like I said, you know, that was something that really, really hit me hard when I saw it, you know, and mainly because, you know, the experiences I had meeting him, knowing him, seeing him, you know, being around him, working out with him, you know, in a ring, rolling around with him and stuff. You know, and also as a father, you know, that was just really, really hard to read. You know, both of his girls were actually with him in the car. One of his daughters, age 12, the other one, age 9. And, you know, one of them, unfortunately, you know, is undergoing surgery to, you know, hopefully get feeling in her legs again. You know, it just a tragic, tragic situation. And this is a guy that, you know, doing the right thing, being a father, you know, not being, you know, a scumbag, not doing anything messed up, being there for his family. And, you know, this unfortunate accident happened. But, you know, for me, they leave an amazing legacy behind, not just as professional wrestlers. And you know, and we don't know what Mark's status is, and I think people should respect that. I don't think people should be saying stuff like, well, who's Mark going to team with? No. You know, this is about their family. You have to respect their family, and you have to respect their privacy and their wishes right now. And that's all there is to it. But, you know, the Briscoe brothers as a tag team leave behind an amazing legacy. And, you know, for me, I put them up there with the Haas brothers as, you know, the greatest tag team that I had seen with my own eyes. And just, you know, such a tragic, tragic loss for wrestling. But, you know, all thoughts of positivity to his family, you know, and all the best to his daughters and his son and just his whole family in general. And, you know, we're all pulling for you guys, and we all wish nothing but the best to the Pugh family.
Yeah, an iconic tag team, and from everything we're reading, obviously, two genuinely good human beings, guys that were not ever, you know, and we use this term a lot on the show, marks for themselves. Never got to, you know, way too conceited in the business or way too sort of having their egos inflated. You know, regular guys from Delaware, right? Who, again, it almost makes you wonder, what was their job? Was it like the legitimate farm that they owned where they made money, producing, you know, agriculture, or pro wrestling? I think you can make the case they were maybe comparable in terms of what they were making money-wise, you know, but they lived very well, comfortably. They were iconic characters, I think very different characters than what we were used to. Because, again, man, when we think about tag team wrestling, and I know insert old joke here at any moment, but yeah, I'm older than you. But I remember just growing up with, we grew up with sometimes with gimmick tag teams. The Samoans, to the Islanders, to the Hart Foundation, to the Killer Bees, to Demolition, to the British Bulldogs, to the Rockers, to the Young Stallions, the Conquistadors, the Brainbusters, to the Fabulous Rougeau. Like, there were just so many different characters and personalities that we've come to know about tag team wrestling. But Mark and Jay that was a really different look for them in the early 2000s. And, for all intents and purposes, you looked at Mark and Jay, you're like, yo, these guys look like they're out of their minds. These guys look like a bunch of country guys from Delaware. What in the world? But you know what? Solid, amazing workers. Obviously got better on the microphone, and they were original. That Briscoe brothers gimmick, the Briscoes, was as original a gimmick as you can find. Did they maybe pull in some stuff from wrestling that they saw? Sure, I think everybody does that. But talk about originality and content, and talk about character development. I know that, and folks, obviously, Pat and I talk off the air, and, full disclosure, Pat loves to bust my balls all the time about FTR, my fandom for FTR, and I get it. I'm a fan. I'm a mark. But I understand that there's a lack of originality with what they present as a team, and I'm intellectually honest enough to admit that. I'll say it out loud. I just said it on this broadcast. I'm going to stand on it. I'm going to plant the flag in the ground and say, hey, I can at least concede that and be intellectually honest. The Briscoes were as original an idea and a concept as you'll ever find. It's going to be impossible to ever duplicate what they represent in terms of presentation and wrestling, and them as a gimmick, as a team, and what they represented. Sorry to get all this whole historical type of narrative here and narration, but I think it's important to sort of illustrate that, because that's how original they were. That's how important they were.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you summed it up really well. That and that's just a little bit of it. That is honestly just a little bit of it. I mean, for me, you look back at this character, you look back at their evolution, the way they started out with the singlets and the shaved head, not really talking much, all business in the ring, and then they end up finding kind of like their voice, and they realized, hey, we are a gimmick, and just Mark with the missing teeth in the front and the way he moves like a chicken in the ring, and but they're so good. They're so crisp, and everything they do makes sense, and it looks great. And, you have Jay, who's kind of the more outspoken one with the dreads and the beard and the tattoos and stuff like that. For me, they're a tag team that they could have thrived in any era. You could insert them anywhere, and they would have thrived. They would have worked, just because of the way they were as performers and just how they developed as characters. And, it wasn't always like that for them, but they found themselves. And, speaking of FTR, I mean, like, they had amazing matches with them, last year alone. Mm-hmm. Like, some of the best matches, not just of their careers, but in the history of the wrestling business and tag team wrestling. Yep. Just classics with them, and to me, it's a testament to how good, the Briscoes are. It's a testament to how good FTR is. FTR is a very talented tag team in the ring. They can go. Technically speaking, in the ring, they're very, very good. To your point, they kind of lack the character part of it. Whether they develop that or choose to develop that remains to be seen. And there's a lot of guys in the indie bit.
And mind you, Pat, like, I said this on a broadcast today, and I don't mind, and I don't care. I'll stand by it. I love FTR,
sure,
but I have to be intellectually honest enough to concede the points that, yes, while they're just good wrestlers, the character work is lacking. So a lot of FTR fans won't be that honest. A lot of FTR fans will not be that transparent. But I will be, because I think it's important to understand what tag team wrestling is. And again, the Briscoes you're right. They would have thrived in any era. But this was really original. Not to call them rednecks or country folk or whatever. The point is, it was a really original gimmick of two guys from the country that just became good talkers, were intimidating. I mean, you looked at the Briscoes, you were like, holy shit, like, I'm scared for my life.
Yeah.
And that was a gimmick that's going to be impossible to replicate. Again, you look at what the Briscoes mean to tag team wrestling. Again, it's a shame. Listen, we're not privy to phone calls. We're not privy to text messages. We're not privy to conversations. It would have been great to see them in WWE at some point in their career. Who knows? Maybe Vince at some point did talk to them. Then maybe they didn't care for the travel schedule. Yeah, they would have made money, but guess what? Maybe the rigors of how laborious the WWE lifestyle is, the travel. Again, we're talking about pre-pandemic, okay, because they've been a hot tag team for years. Who knows? Maybe Vince did talk to them. Maybe they just didn't want to take the money. Maybe they just, again, from what we've read, they have their family in Delaware. The amount of traveling that would require them being with the WWE, apparently it wasn't for them, and that's okay. And they were good making the money that they made. They weren't struggling. It's not like they were like pinching pennies, folks. They lived well, aside from their business that they have in agriculture and farming. But it seems like they weren't interested in going to WWE. I'm certain the offers were there. Maybe it's not for everybody. That travel schedule, the rigors, the demands. It would have been nice to have seen them. But, again, we don't know the logistics. But I'm just hypothesizing with you.
I know that Jay had been on a few podcasts, and he'd been asked about it, and he had kind of said, he doesn't know how he feels about it, or leaving his wife, with 3 kids. Like, again, a testament to how much of a family man he was. A testament to that, to the fact that, money wasn't everything. He wrestled because he loved it. Mark wrestled because they loved it. And his family was the most important thing in his life. But yeah, absolutely. I think it would have been great. And speaking of WWE, I mean, to see a guy like Triple H, who Mark and Jay, I think, had a dark match. I don't think they ever officially worked for WWE, but, Mark and Jay, for Triple H to tweet out condolences to Jay says a lot about their impact, not just, in Ring of Honor, but wrestling as a whole. Biggie had also tweeted that, the New Day had borrowed stuff from them, had stolen at some point, some of their stuff, some of their moves, and how they were innovators to tag team wrestling for the time. In the last 25 years, I mean, the Briscoes, they got to be up there, with the best tag teams in the last 25 years and some of the best all time. So, for them to do that, for them to mention it even on NXT, that was really, really huge. And I think really it's one of those nice moments where, you see the quote unquote wrestling community come together. You see that it is a brotherhood where people, who've never even met them, who work for WWE, recognize, their contributions to the business and the way they are as people and respect them and acknowledge them. And that's such a huge testament to just their legacy and just the way they were as people. So, it's such a sad moment, but, on the same token, we look at these things and, we realize that, life is very precious and life is special, and that it's important to maximize everything you can in this life, because you don't know how it is that it's going to affect others. And you want, I'm sure want to leave our own legacy behind. So, and Jay to me is one of those guys that took advantage of every second that he had in life. And, again, just really left behind a fantastic legacy, not only as a wrestler, but as a man and as a father. And he's somebody that, I think we could all respect for sure.
Absolutely. Again, tragic loss in the pro wrestling community, obviously. Jay Briscoe passing away at the age of 38, gone too soon, certainly this past week. Our hearts and our thoughts and prayers go out to his immediate family. I know there is a GoFundMe page, and sometimes I know we're a little skeptical of GoFundMe because of stuff we've learned over the years. Sometimes people do some really malicious things, but apparently it is a legitimate GoFundMe. I don't have the link per se. Sometimes those links are very, very long, folks, but if you Google it, I believe that there's a certification on that GoFundMe page for the family of Jay Briscoe. So, again, our thoughts and prayers that will go out to him. A great guy in the wrestling community, a great father, great wrestler, but just a great human being. And God knows we need more of those. not just in pro wrestling, but I think in overall society as a whole. So again, unfortunately, Jay Briscoe, ladies and gentlemen, passing away this week at the age of 38 in a tragic automobile accident.